Hey y'all, my name is Samah Ali and I am one of the Associate Shorts Programmers for Doc NYC. It is my pleasure to be hosting the Q&A for Doc NYCU's Hunter College Shorts program for this year's festival. We have several people in the room, as you can see, and I'll let them all introduce themselves. Please state your name in addition to what film you directed. Pooj, let's start with you.
Hi, I'm Pooj. I directed Arrhythmia. Um,
Amanda?
Hi, my name's Amanda Madden, and I directed Memory Map.
AK?
Hi, my name is AK, and I directed Here Now, Chapter 4.
Andrea?
Hi, my name is Andrea Lerner, and I directed Funny Faces in Smyrna Beach.
Silvana?
Hi, my name is Silvana, and I directed Under the Skin.
Robin?
Hi everyone, I'm Robin, and I directed Flotsam.
It's so nice to have so many faces in front of me, all with such brilliant films, very lyrical, and we'll get to all of my thoughts on them just shortly. But first, to launch us off into discussion, and Robin, I'll start with you, but this question is for everybody. What was the inspiration for your story, and why did you, decide to capture it?
Yeah, so this is a little short piece, and I was sort of thinking about, at the time, bodies of water and how they kind of provide structure to my life and in different ways, and how I sort of emotionally respond to them. And the Gowanus Canal is sort of one of those bodies of water for me, and it's, I'm sure you guys have heard of it, all you Brooklyn people especially. But it's sort of this like contested body of water, and it's like highly polluted from this sort of industrial manufacturing past. It's a super fun site. So it's like a major health liability. And cleaning it up is a great idea, I think. And I don't think many people would argue that, but I think what happens often is that real estate developers and sort of corporate interests will buy up parcels of land around these spaces, promising to remediate them. And then, sort of at what price? I think usually what happens is communities get priced out and pushed away. So that's sort of what I was thinking about. And I was just sort of imagining what it would be like to be in this space, or how I would want to be in this space. It's like, I want to swim there, maybe, without being a hazard to health, but also not being the result of this like corporate real estate takeover of this neighborhood. So that's sort of what I was thinking about. And also just, how do we live in these spaces and these landscapes where so much kind of like ecological collapse is happening in a way that is sort of now. Clearly we can't be there. It's gonna make us sick. Or swim in it, but what would that be like? And can we find joy in these spaces? Can we find solace? So yeah, that's sort of what I was thinking.
And who did your animation? Was that you who's drawing that?
Yeah, I did. Yeah, that was the first time I've done that type of animation. So it was sort of an experiment. But yeah, it was just, I just drew it in Photoshop over some video of a swimmer who was not me, but I would have liked to maybe actually have video of myself swimming, but didn't work out that way.
Thank you. Silvana, what inspired your film?
At the beginning, basically, I like to do something about immigration. And for me, it was a very important topic. And basically, I think 2 years ago, we were in class and I was kind of analyzing the Trump speeches, and I remember in some point he said, like, when he was talking about the caravans, that come from Central America. He said that they are not people, they are animals. And for me, this was kind of very strong and always stay in my head, you know. And in fact, when I was at the school in New York, but I came from Miami. And in Miami, the first immigrants that came were also unaccompanied children at the time of the Cold War, the Cuban children. And then I thought, okay, I really like to focus in the children, first because they are the most vulnerable, they don't have a voice also. And also was tied to Miami story of immigration. And for me, this kind of was important. And then also was, at the beginning, I thought to do a documentary, but was very difficult because I tried to interview people, I tried to go to homestay facility, and it was like, basically, you couldn't access on none of these places. Then it's kind of, okay, how I can continue working in this outside of research, you know, if I can't film. And then I come with the idea, okay, if I do an animation, like resolve in some way my issue of inability of filming. And then I started to work research a lot and basically start to create animation based on that.
And maybe I missed this, but how did the animation process go? Because it's quite a visual piece. And I was wondering if that was animation that you created or if you had an animator who jumped on board.
I animate the whole piece. And this took me like long time and millions of hours. But also the aesthetic of the piece for me was also took me more than one semester to figure out, because I like it to, I didn't like only focus on aesthetic of the piece. If not, I like the right aesthetic for the piece that was related to the children. And then it's like when I started to research, many of the papers that I read were about the identity of the children. And most of the children, they come from Central America, but also they are Maya descendants, and they don't even speak Spanish. That means for me, this was very important point. And then I realized I didn't know too much about the Mayans, and I need to kind of research more. And then I discovered the Mayans used to create their own colors. And this was kind of very important for me. And then I say, okay, because as an artist, as a visual artist, I always have been creating my own materials. And I was like, I like to put together all these things, their identity, their origin, and also my own background as an artist. And then it's kind of, when I was reading the Maya, I say, okay, why I don't really create my own materials? And basically I started to create layers in paper of using the main agricultural products from Central America. That also those products are tied to the economic dependency of the Northern Triangle region to US. And then I said, okay, if I can do that and I can create the materials and then embed it in each character, in each scenario, that will be like, it's no, for the people that don't know, won't perceive, but for me it was important, embed this identity and this dependency inside of the piece. And also like using the Maya techniques. In fact, I can show you if you like, shortly, like very quickly. Like basically, those are some of the products.
Wow.
This is cafe coffee. This is anato. And this is cacao. And from there, it's like, those were like anil, that is a product that the Mayas used to create blue. When you apply many layers and expose to the sun, it starts to get more blue and blue. And this is the main character pant. And the main character t-shirt is with sugar. And from there, I kind of came with the whole aesthetic of the piece.
Wow, I'm glad I asked because the artistic process behind getting those colors is so meticulous. Thank you. Thank you for sharing.
Oh, thank you. Yes.
Andrea, I want to switch to you. What inspired your story? You've kind of mentioned it in the clip of, stumbling upon this reel of you making funny faces, but I wanted to know how you kind of took that up and made the story that we see today.
So I didn't make a film, right? The footage was already there and found. I shot it in 2004. But what happened is I was looking at a footage that I thought would be amazing. There was me very pregnant, totally camouflaged, and doing this very dirty hip hop dance that you would imagine was a very big man. But after the dance, I would slowly take myself, the camouflage, and you see there was a pregnant woman. And I couldn't find, it was off frame. It was horrible. It was nothing like I have remembered, right? And then in the continuation was this footage of these funny faces that I remember doing with everybody, with the whole community of artists that we were working. And it worked as a travel capsule for me. I all of a sudden remember so vividly that moment. And I started talking to myself. I was like, oh my God, when this happened, this was, your life was so differently. The encounter of myself with myself was very emotional at that moment. And I decided that I was gonna do this personal essay film for my doc class using that footage. And also we were in a pandemic. So it just all, there was something pushing us together. It was very obvious for me that I had to do this. And the making of the film, English is not my first language. So at first I thought I could record something very casual of my conversation with myself, but I would stumble too often in words, and it just didn't create a flow that was usable. So I created a little script for the film, but I wasn't reading it. I was trying to just evoke what I wrote in the most spontaneous way possible. But it was also an intimate moment that it was a little difficult at first to share with other people. I felt like maybe it was not pertinent to anyone else but me. I wasn't sure how it would resonate with other people, even though I know time is a story that resonates with everyone. But I wasn't sure what I had in my hands when I first finished it.
Well, what you gave us was beautiful. And that's what matters.
Thank you so much.
Amanda, I want to smooth over to you because the stories were very similar in their reflection. So talk to us about the inspiration behind Memory Map.
Thank you. I just love what you said so much, Andrea, about time is something that resonates for everyone. I just wanted that's such a great quote. And I think it's so, that hits home. My inspiration was, I was thinking a lot about, I was just thinking a lot about place and identity and body and sort of the ways those things overlapped. And I was thinking about it in this way of just walking through New York or biking through New York, and just like being able to see the past, like just right in front of me, like on a street corner. Like I was like, I would pass these places and remember like a really specific moment from years before. And it was just interesting to me that that was like, for some reason, that was lodged in my memory and attached to this like physical space in the city. And so I just was really interested in this idea of like sort of the marks we leave on a place, and then the ways that the city, like the place marks us, and that interaction, and wanted to visualize that, like thinking about us traveling through the city, living all these different lives, all these changes, these transformations we go through, jobs changing, houses changing, friends changing, like good experiences, bad experiences, weird experiences. And like, if those all stack up, then like, what does the city look like? Like, how is the city informed by all of these layers of memories and people like interacting with each other? And it's interesting, like, because I was in New York for 11 years and I just moved back to Salt Lake, where I grew up. I moved back 2 months ago. And so it's funny, like watching this film now, it feels like this, it kind of feels like this love letter to New York. Like, and it's almost like I predicted this move before I even knew it, because at the end I talk about like, you know, other maps that can exist. And that was before I even knew I was going to leave. But it was just this idea that like this mapping strategy that I was thinking about is never going to be complete. And I think that's something I'm also interested in filmmaking, is like making projects that are not contained, but kind of like seep out and are connected to our lives and change over time. And like this movie, I think it's going to look different to me at so many different points in my life. And like I could remake this movie forever, you know, and it will always be different. And like I get excited thinking about this project as a catalyst. Like I would love to make this in collaboration with other artists, and I would love to see what their maps look like and see like what are the things that that layer into a place for them. And then I think New York is just like a really special place to kind of see, like I think it happens everywhere that we kind of like layer ourselves onto a place, but there's something about New York that just makes it so visceral. Like you can just see it stacks up in a way that I think it's maybe you know, in a landscape like this, it's more diluted, it's more spread out, it's spread across the desert, and it's in the mountains, and it's not like on a city corner. Yeah, and then yeah, just like also thinking about sort of attachment to place, and like I think I have always had this sense that there's going to be a particular place in the world, or there's going to be a city, or there's going to be a neighborhood or a corner that's just going to like, I'm going to step onto it, and I'm just going to like know I'm home. And I think now as I grow, I feel less and less like that's true and ever possible, that like there's going to be one particular place that's going to like speak to me so much that I won't, you know, that I'll just know. But I also still kind of like having that idea in the back of my head, like the places I haven't even been to that I have some intuitive relationship with. And so like, what would happen if we met each other?
What you just said, like that whole musing was very, it's just so true to what we see on the screen for Memory Map, especially, you know, the lines, and there's 3 films in this screening that has like animation in them, so I'm really keen on talking about it. But the lines that you were drawing in between neighborhoods and in between boroughs were just like very poetic, and to see that I mean, those are really just like, you know, mind maps, like humans going from one place to the next, and the amount of times that you moved, and then you moved again, and then another neighborhood where you moved, and it just hit. And I feel like for folks who are from New York or are living in New York, it's just so relatable.
Yeah. I'm also just, I love that. Like, I love thinking about mapping as a strategy for like navigating other landscapes, like internal landscapes or emotional landscapes or you know, like and this project, they were like, I was like, oh, you could map anything. Like you could map like all sorts of growing and all sorts of learning, and just to visualize that in some ways, like, you know, I think it's beautiful.
I 100% agree. And actually, this really wants me to bring in AK in because of Here Now. What inspired your film, AK?
Yeah, well, very much along the line of what Amanda just said, for sure. So I moved to New York 3-4 years ago, and Here Now is, as it says, chapter 4. It's part of a kind of like a bigger project of trying to understand the reality I'm in now, and what is here and how it differs from where I come from. So I'm from Denmark, and in the first, when you first think about it, you're like, oh, that's Europe. That's kind of the same. I think everybody in Denmark thinks they know exactly what the US is about, and everybody in the US knows what Europe is about. And when you lived in both places, it's just like there are like very substantial differences that you never think about because we hear the same pop music and watch the same films and whatever. And then you come here and you have like, it's just a whole other reality. It's like one of the things, it's like, it's difficult to explain, but I mean, when I came here was really when I found out that I'm a white person, because I'm also a white person in Denmark, but everybody is white, and Denmark for sure has taken land and done all the horrible things, but here, but not where I lived, right? I lived in Denmark proper, and that my family have 1,000 years, for 1,000 years lived there, in like documented. So I didn't have all of these notions of what places and who it belongs to and who takes it over. And then you come here and then you're suddenly part of this whole thing in a totally different way. And I mean, like, even living in this neighborhood that is rapidly gentrifying and mostly Puerto Rican and Dominican. And just living here, I'm also part of that whole gentrification process that Robin also is talking to. And there's the same kind of, there's also the Superfund side I'm talking about. So it's like very much the same, okay, who lives in a place, who gets to live there? And what are the conditions they get to live under, right? And when does it change? Like, does it change when there's suddenly some value to pick up on, or like, who cares about the people and why are they cared about? And this whole political landscape is just like very complex to understand. And yeah, so all of that has inspired me a lot to like try and find out what is actually going on in this place where I live now. And so this whole Here Now project is a lot of like, okay, who actually lived in my house? Who actually owned the land? And how has the development been of the neighborhood where I am and the country as a whole? Like, there's a lot of history to learn. Yeah, so that's kind of like the background that is like, yeah.
Mm-hmm. Thank you for sharing. I love the self-exploratory process, especially how that unfolds on screen. Pooj, I want to get you in here. Talk to us about arrhythmia.
Yeah, so I made this while under like deep quarantine earlier. I was like, well, what can I shoot and make without leaving my apartment or just the vicinity? And I wanted to kind of get like kind of imbue onto the film just like what I was consuming, the media, but being fearing what and how to break beyond that. And that was what the piece was kind of grappling with, and kind of creating this like new form of rhythm of existence. Those are the ideas I was working with.
Well, you definitely hit it.
Yeah.
The past 8 months, to say the least, have been fearful for everybody in the world. So you definitely were working with the truth, and I appreciate that. Jess, finally, I want to get you in here. What was the inspiration for Leisure Pleasure?
I like to say leisure pleasure because it rhymes. I had this, my grandmother took my family on a cruise when I was like 17 or something. And I felt so uncomfortable with the idea of being on this all-inclusive cruise that I decided to ethnographize so that I could pretend I wasn't part of the problem. I guess, yeah, I don't know. And then I just sort of had this footage lying around. I never really knew what to do with it. Originally, when I shot it, I wanted to make a horror film about sort of like this idea of luxury and like the elitism and rest that I felt was like kind of creepy, and it's, you know, ignoring of so much in order to create a space where that would happen. And just like the power dynamics aboard the vehicle, like, I don't know. So I just had this footage from a really long time ago, and I thought some of the landscapes were so like haunting, like the landscape of like the man on the treadmill looking out over like the endless sea. I just felt like it was such a good metaphor for like this capitalist ethos of like pushing and like self-care and like rest and working. I just felt like it sort of became this weird encapsulation of the sort of the hypocrisies inherent in like wealth and class, I guess.
All of you were really thinking when you're making your documentaries. That is some deep thoughts. And Jess, I totally love leisure pleasure that direction. And I agree, there are some shots in your film where they're extremely haunting. And, you know, I don't want to take up too much time because we're like profusely running out of time. And so, you know, my last question to you all is actually, you know, about the lyrical part and the poetic part about your films. All of them are very lyrical. So I want to know more about the editing process and how that really took up some space in your post-production. Jess, let's start with you.
I kind of just focused on the landscapes first. Like I just picked the most striking stuff. And then I was like, how can I build a narrative around this? Like I started just with the visuals. And then I was like, okay, well, I have these haunting landscapes of like leisure, like what are the sort of outtakes that sort of give us a portrait of like what else is happening here. So then I sort of started like zooming in and cropping to like all these moments that are sort of not in the frame intentionally, which are like all the people who are making this thing happen. And like the sort of the consumption, like these shots of like people eating, like, I don't know, like I feel like I was also playing with like a kitschiness in the whole thing. Like there's this sort of meditation music and me being like a creepy neutral dictionary lady. So I kind of feel like I worked pretty intuitively. And that's how the editing worked.
Anyone else want to jump in on their editing process?
I'll do it. I'll jump in. Mm-hmm. So for me, it was a very different process of creating space and connection between the face, what was going on with the face, and how it related to my conversation. And it was a little bit of a battle because I didn't want to be creating obvious connections, and I wanted both layers to work independently and find its connection through the audience. You know, the viewer would have to make those connections, and I'm hoping different people connect powerful with different places. But it was basically also creating space for the visual of the face to have some space to breathe, because it feels almost that it could be a battle between listening and looking. So that was my struggle, how much space to create between the words and how much space to create for the visuals. So that's what was my struggle to balance on editing, how to make them independent, but at the same time create enough space for each one to be generous with each other.
And I can jump in real quick if there's some time.
Yes.
And so in the editing process, I had like, I was putting a lot of text on screen, which was like another layer of added, like it's not just sound and image, it was also text and how to allow the text as a character character to kind of be its own voice. And that process actually was the text is the last piece, even though it started with the first piece when I wrote it down. It was the last piece in the editing process being put in the final version, that the sound and the visuals came first and what text kind of went with or laid on top.
Mhm. Thank you. Anyone else?
Yes, I can.
Silvana.
For me, it was not so much an edition process. The edition was relatively quickly, but it was the creation of each scene that took me a long, long time. And also, like for me, like the most important in each scene was try to focus on the emotions of the characters and really pass this idea that they are human beings. And this was my main focus on how to create, how to animate them, how try to animate the expression the most that I could, focus on all the technical process to try to arrive there. The edition was more at the end and how I transition from one scene to another. And then it kind of I use the animation, more abstract images to transition from one scene to another, but basically focused also in this, in the lights, in the fluorescent lights, because it was something that is very annoying to be in a place that you can't sleep because the lights are 24 hours on, and also there is a lot of noise. And then it's like this part come more in the edition process because I create this kind of animation of the lights and use to divide the scenes and after to kind of, I think the most complex of the edition was also the sound. Somebody did the sound for me, but I also, we worked together doing parts, and then was kind of, because when I arrived to the edition part, basically the scenes were already ready. I move around the scenes, but basically I plan the scenes as they take so long to make it. I plan before, and then it's basically how I create these transitions and the scenes there. Yeah.
Thank you. We have about a minute or so left. Is there any last person who wants to talk about their editing?
I can say something.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so obviously there's one in point and one out point in my film. So the editing was kind of like in the finding out what to put in there. And I just thought that it worked really well with this just one image of this very mundane street corner where this very poisonous thing is going on, radiating out to all the people who are actually passing. Like they have, that's some of the things they measured, and everybody who walks past that bodega, that corner, are actually getting a higher radiation than they should have. And so that was kind of like, I just thought that that was more interesting, that I actually go into and look at where it is, but just you don't see it. It's just there. You don't notice it. It's like this very mundane scene of something that's actually affecting a lot of people in the everyday life.
I think from a cinematography point of view as well, that is probably the most insidious shot that you could have given the audience, because it really is, it just shows how, banal it is as a street corner. Like this could be the street corner you constantly like walk across to go to the subway to get your meal from a bodega. And so I thought that was very smart, a very smart decision on your behalf. Y'all, we are out of time already, despite me having so many more questions on the board. So I do want to thank all of the directors for being present here in this space. Thank you all for answering, my few questions that I could throw your way. And I really appreciate all of you at home for spending some time with us selecting this program. And I hope you enjoy more selections from our 2020 lineup and enjoy the rest of your virtual festival, most importantly. Filmmakers, again, thank you all so much for being here with me today. It's been awesome.
Thank you so much.